You're now listening to Sound Talent Media. Check out more shows at soundtalentmedia.com.
This episode is brought to you by Madewell. Ready to step up your denim game? The experts at Madewell use premium fabric and the latest denim technology to make super comfy, never want to take them off jeans in fits and styles for everyone. The kind of jeans you'll reach for again and again. Get $20 off your online jeans purchase by using code Spotify20 at Madewell.com. Terms apply. Please see Madewell.com/promos for full offer details.
Back, baby. We are back with another episode of the X-Man podcast. I'm your host, Doc Coyle. Thanks for hanging out with me. I took last week off. My apologies. Just I'm like behind on the guests. I can't get my schedules right. Your boy's busy. I got this thing to do. I got that thing to do. And then someone cancels, and then they push it to this day. And you got listen, it's a thing. All right. So, but I kind of realized I said, you know what? I'm not going to beat myself up. I'd rather put out a good show that I can be proud of than just cobble something together last minute. And so that's what I do. So, you know, sometimes I'm just going to take a week off, and not because I'm resting on my laurels. No, I have two episodes I can't put out right now because of situations. And then just a lot of shuffling. But listen, we're going to get it down. Your boy's on top of it. All right. I will try not to disappoint you. I have a lot going on right now. I really do. Bad Wolves record, pretty much done. Just crossing some T's, dotting some I's, getting some mixes in. A lot of songs. Not sure what's going to make the record. Pretty exciting stuff. But it's also like we thought we were done, then the label wanted some more songs, so we went back, and then it's like this thing of like you think you're done, but you're not really done. So, and now I'm moving into this other phase where I'm trying to work on other projects. I started working on a project for someone, and it's a weird thing. I've never been the type of person who would just sit down and go like, I am writing now, and I am making a song. That's never really been my vibe. Like I don't really have that workman's type of ethic to writing music. My way is a bit more like, man, I gotta be inspired, man. I gotta feel the feeling, man. And I think both are good, right? Like sometimes you want to be able to mine the inspiration and then work it, right? And then some people just, like John, for example, from Bad Wolves. I mentioned this on the Q&A where I'm like, that dude just goes to the studio and he comes out with some shit. He just knows how to grind it out. And he has that thing of like, I'm going to the studio, I'm making a song. And so anyway, so I had a project where it's like, I've been kind of procrastinating for a long while. And not because I was just being lazy. I just literally had things in the way. And so anyway, so I was like, fine, like, all right, I need to work on this shit. And I like have an idea and I get it down. Okay, boom. Now I'm just working on other ideas. I'm just not liking anything. And I think that's for me when I think my standards are fairly high. And that's why it's tough for me to work that way. But I'm figuring out. I think it's like anything. The more you do it, the better you'll get. So I really want to get into a flow of just writing consistently, because I go periods sometimes where I'm not really writing, and I'm not, some of the touring stuff might be up in the air for the time being. So I really want to use this time and just work on some projects. Anyway, what do I want to talk about? Nothing crazy, just something's been rattling around in my head lately about just, I don't know, like sometimes you're doing something for X amount of time and you kind of lose the perspective of what's been going on, right? And one thing I kind of realized lately is that I've sacrificed kind of quite a bit to be in Bad Wolves. And that's had some great benefits, of course, that I cannot deny. But, you know, not too long before Bad Wolves was a thing, I was writing kind of full time. That was like my main job. And then the podcast took off, and there was this freedom when God forbid ended. It was almost like this that I could, in a sense, go out and speak for myself. And I think when you're in a band, you realize that your words publicly tend to affect other people. And so you have to be a bit more careful, and you have to kind of walk a line. And I'm someone, like I said, I have this show, I'm on other shows, and I'm a fairly tactical person. Like, it's rare where I make a gaffe and say something stupid that gets quoted. And, you know, I've had my moments, but not in a long while. I'm pretty careful. But, you know, I don't know if careful is that. It's not that exciting. It's not that entertaining. So it's like, I don't know. I find myself editing myself lately more now than ever. And I don't know. There's just something toothless about that. I think we kind of know what the unvarnished truth looks like, or authenticity feels like. It's a reason why we respect the Charles Barkleys or Howard Sterns, people, or even I'd say, you know, people more in the political sphere that you trust, that where now it's become kind of commodified, where people understand that if I say something over the top or tantalizing and it has the veneer of authenticity, but the truth, it's just provocative and it's just trolling, that it will get an impact. And sometimes that's somehow being conflated for authenticity, but it's really not. That's something I think we look to in thought leaders or people that we just respect. And it's something I kind of want to get back to, but I don't know. Is that the sacrifice for being in a band? I don't know. What's more important, right? So many people are expressing themselves or wanting to express themselves about social issues, political issues. But I find myself, if I see a musician on social media, just nonstop politics, this social issues, I get I'm like, dude, shut the fuck up. Just like, can you talk about something else? Can you talk about the weather? Can you just, I don't like anybody who's just one note. It's like, that's what you think about all the time. And listen, like right now, I just did a little run on Twitter talking about politics and films, but not in a, like, I'm picking at a certain group, just more just film analysis and kind of reverse engineering some of this stuff, because I find it interesting. And, but if I did that every day, is that something you want to look at? I mean, I think in general, in these spaces, I think if you have a focus, right? If you're like, I have people in there who are like UFO people, and that's what they talk about. And then you get known, that's what you do. And I'm just interested in too many different things where I feel like maybe I'm too all over the place. I don't know. But yeah, if you're just talking, all you're doing is everything is culture war thing, this politics thing. It's like, Jesus, take a fucking day off. All right. Watch a movie, take a walk, talk about the beach and the sunset. Jesus Christ. All right. I didn't really know where that was going, but it went somewhere. We definitely said some words. But no, it'd be nice to be able to open up a little more. But I'm the type of person, I really do examine things from all sides. So half the time I'll have a thought, and then halfway through I'll actually think about the reverse of it and look at it from the other side, and almost will stop me in my tracks from making a statement, because I can really see it from 360 degrees. And sometimes I have to make a statement with all these caveats, because I understand that it's very difficult to make very blank statements without providing all the context. I don't know. All right. Listen, y'all. We have a sponsor this week. That's right. The sponsors are back. Ain't no joke. We have a band from New Jersey. Fuck yeah. All right. And they're called Serious Matters. I guess they have a very serious song for you. This song is called Glitches.
never come from me. What the hell am I supposed to say when every word I speak has never come from me? Has never come from me. All of these glitches in my speech, I'm so tight, can't endure what's in store. Fighting all of these glitches in my speech. I'm so tongue-tied, such a mess. I'm so dead fighting.
Whoa. So that was Serious Matters with Glitches. Man, seriously, I'm what I actually try and do when I do this show is I don't listen to the song. Sometimes I'll check out the band like when they first email me, but I'll try not to listen to the song that I'm going to play until I talk about it, because I kind of want my reaction to be fresh. And that's probably one of the best songs I've heard on this show from the sponsors. That was really incredible. It felt fresh. It felt unique. In fact, that's from Jersey. It's kind of no surprise to me because there is something in the water, I think, with just the originality of the bands and kind of eclectic influences. And you can hear all kinds of things. I was checking out the band's website, which is seriousmattersnj.com. They've been around since 2016. They put out an EP in 2018 called Can You See the Sky From Here? And it came out, what's the label? Manic Cat Records. Oh, I'm sorry, that was yes. Anyway, I'm getting all this stuff screwed around. I'm probably getting the names wrong to these albums, but they also have a full length that they put out in 2020 called Mistaking Wasps for Dragonflies. I love that. Really cool artwork. But I actually, while I was listening to it, I went on Spotify and was like favoriting all their albums, because now I want to go and check out the albums because I thought it was really, really badass. So yeah, they're a fucking really cool band. And anyway, so here's all the stuff. Go to the website. Their Facebook is facebook.com/seriousmattersnj. Instagram is the same thing. Twitter's SMB Band. Or I'm sorry, SM Band. There you go. And go shout them out. Go download their music. Go send a message. Tell them Doc Coyle, X-Man sent you. Thank you so much to the band and Matt from the band. That was badass. I want to listen to that again. God damn. All right. And if you'd like to sponsor the show, you know what to do. Just shoot me an email at the xmenpodcast@gmail.com or just drop in the DMs. I kind of have a little backlog right now, but you'll be fine. Just hit me up, reserve a spot. It'll be good. Okay, we have a great show coming up. We're talking to Justin Archangel. I've always liked having people on the industry side of the show, industry side of things in music and metal, but I haven't really done it as much lately. But Justin, as we mentioned, we've been talking about doing this for quite some time. His story is so unique, and just a caveat, he kind of interviews me about Bad Wolves a little bit. So the little beginning, maybe it's stuff you guys might have already heard, even though I talked about some things that I haven't been too forthright with. But he manages Trivium since the beginning, more or less. He manages Amon Amarth, King Diamond, Merciful Fate. He co-manages Behemoth, and he works with a company 5B who has Slipknot and Lamb of God, Megadeth, tons of huge bands. So this is really someone at the top of the industry when it comes to heavy metal, hard rock. And he's the type of person where the conversations we have here, because this isn't quite as linear as some of my other shows. He and I almost kind of exploring things off the cuff. It's very similar to the conversations he and I have when the microphones aren't on. And we did this in person, and I'm glad, because now that, you know, the virus seems mostly contained in America, at least, I want to try and just get back to doing them in person as much as possible. The Zoom stuff is great. It's very convenient, especially with people overseas, things like that. But I want to get back in touch in person. It feels different. I think it provides ultimately a better product for the listeners. But I think you guys are going to enjoy this. So please check out my conversation with the awesome and serious man, because we had Serious Matters on. Now we have a serious man, Mr. Justin Archangel. Justin, thank you for being on the show. It's been we've been talking about doing this for a long time.
A long time. I think we started talking about it. There was a show. It was I can't remember what metal show it was. It was at the not the Palladium.
Yeah, Trivia
the
March.
Yeah, that was it.
Yeah.
And we were talking about I don't know what we were talking about, Machine Head and All That Remains, or some sort of philosophical talk about bands or radio or something like that.
Well, this is, I think, before Bad Wolves really hit.
Yeah.
And we were talking about this idea between kind of walking that line between going too far radio as a metal band, and in some ways, in hindsight, I guess, Bad Wolves in a sense broke the paradigm, because our first single was this kind of phenomenon, and then it allowed us to kind of just exist in radio. But it was just weird because we had this super heavy record. It was very catchy, very in metal terms, mainstream.
Yeah, and you guys are real metal guys, and
Yeah.
you know your taste. I've had so many questions for you about that whole experience. So you're not going to interview me. I'm going to interview you.
Oh, I don't care. I mean, it's a conversation, whatever.
Yeah.
What?
I have to ask, I know where you come from. I know what your point of view is. I know all your bands. I saw them grow. I've seen you play. What was your mindset like? Did you expect that to happen?
No. Well, no. I mean,
or how did you even feel when it was proposed to you? It's hey, Bad Wolves, we're gonna put Zombie out.
One, it already existed.
Yeah.
And there was so much happening behind the scenes that I didn't have to do with. I mean, with Bad Wolves, I've always been a peripheral member. It's not like Godfrey, where I'm the main guy. It was a band I joined where they had about 10 songs done, more or less, but it wasn't a full band.
Right.
It was just John and Tommy, and there was a guy, Max, was in the band, who didn't want to tour, so he didn't really want to be in the band. And Chris, our other guitar player, was there, but he was touring. He wasn't really around. So we were kind of putting this live band together around this record. And then once we got Better Noise, which was 11/7 at the time, involved in Zoltan, it kind of goes, okay, we're now working with the #1 rock radio label in the world. So now we know we can gear the record a little more in this direction. And so Tommy already had the cover. It was going to be for his other band, Westville Massacre, but ended up, leaving that band. So we had that, and we had a couple other little more crossover songs we were working on, but it allowed us to kind of go a little more in that direction. And then I didn't even know that Dolores O'Riordan was going to do those vocals until after she died.
Right.
So we heard stuff in the background, but no one was telling us oh, this is happening on this, because we were, whatever, there was so much going on. But once she passed away, to me, it made sense to have her to release a song. It seemed like that's what should be done. And I think from the outside looking in, I totally understand if it felt opportunistic. But
it felt. I mean, she passed away at that time. I mean, that is what it is. And then it took a life of its own. But me, I'm I know the behind the scenes stuff. So I know you guys. And then 2 months later, I see stuff online where you're playing TV shows and playing the song. And I'm oh my God, there's got to be something what is.
Well, keep in mind, so behind the scenes, the phenomenon actually brought the worst out of certain people. And so it was, in a way, it was hey, here's the greatest opportunity of your life. But it's also a little bit, you have to kind of sell your soul a little bit to just exist in this environment. And it's stuff I haven't really talked about publicly.
Because you guys were in a sphere that no metal band that I know has ever been in, that I'm aware of.
But I think what makes it peculiar is that we were a brand new band. We didn't have a record out. We weren't established.
I think you had maybe one single before that.
Yeah, well, no, we had 2 heavier songs out, and we were leading up to putting out the album, and all that happened. It was just a very odd circumstance, so we got to build off that, but it's like when you have a new band and that band, the perspective is, hey, we're gonna have to go out and build the band from ground up, right? Then it's all for one for all, right? We need all hands on deck. But then when there's something happens and it blows up, now the band becomes an immediately marketable quantity, or I don't know if I worded that correctly, but it becomes an entity that is marketable, and they understood this will generate X amount of money. Everything shifted and it became kind of a Lord of the Flies type situation. And it made it, so it was really cool we had this opportunity, but the culture around it was horrible.
Right.
And it was really a shame, you know.
Did you enjoy it? Like, it must have been a rocket ride.
It's like yes and no, you know. So, but it kind of falls in line with my philosophy that, like, at least with my life, nothing is ever just like come easy. Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
It was like, so it's like, in a sense, Zombie was, here's a lottery ticket, but in order to get the money, you got to run through fire and jump over cliffs and get pelted with, like, and it's going to take a long time. Mm-hmm. So the way I looked at it, lawyer for the band, Eric German, is a good friend of mine. He said something to me that stuck with me, because these things were going on and I was like, every bone in my body was like, run, quit, get away from this environment. And he's like, listen, he's like, in my law firm, he goes, a lot of people that have got to really tough heights, he's like, the people that make it are the ones that basically take the most abuse and take the most shit, that to get to a certain level, you kind of have to go through this gauntlet. Mm-hmm. And so that was something where I was like, I just weighed one hand the other, like, okay, here's my pride and like my dignity and like that thing, the sense of, and over here is like, oh, here's this big thing that you may only get this one chance to ever kind of get into these arenas, and I don't even mean literal arenas, like these, and so that was, I just made a calculus. I was like, all right, let's go through it. Let's see how much we can take to get through and maybe achieve something that
because it obviously opened doors, because obviously that song, I mean, the playlist that you were on the top of, on the streaming sites was insane. The numbers were insane, but you're also doing a lot of big arena tours and supporting, and those opportunities probably came from that. But did it change the outlook of the band about what kind of music you had to write, or how did it affect the creativity?
Yeah, because there was the weird thing where most of the record was heavy, but it was still catchy, and that's
what I liked. Like when I heard the band the first time, I was into the idea of the band because it was catchy, heavy, but it was also clean vocals and it had power and it was accessible. So I was into that, and I was just curious, how did that change?
Well, we rode the line, and there were certain things on the second record that to me felt a little too like Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde, where it's like, here's a Nickelback song, sounds like Nickelback. Here's a song sounds like Immure or something. And I'm like, to me, that didn't really jibe. And I was like, and both were good, but I was like, at some point, you're kind of going to split the baby with the audience. And so you're going to get two contingencies who are never going to be totally 100% in your band because they kind of like the one thing you do more than the other.
We've been through that for a decade and a half with Trivium.
And so with the latest record, I was hoping the band would be less ADD and streamline everything. Mm-hmm. So that the heavier stuff was maybe took the edge off a hair, and then the lighter stuff had some more balls, so that it felt like you were listening to one band.
I mean, what you're talking about is, in my experience working in this business with hard rock and metal, it's the hardest thing to find that blend of heaviness, melody, catchiness, and accessibility. If it was easier, more people would do it.
But I'd say this, I don't think there's one band that I could point out that started like day one with songs as mainstream and songs as heavy on the same
probably
record.
Not that
I don't think there's any, and that wasn't planned. It just kind of, it's like
Disturbed but in reverse,
But even Disturbed doesn't, like, our some of our radio songs are like they're songs that girls like. I mean, really, like, it's not like Crazy Town's Superfly Sugar Baby, that level, but because even the Zombie has big guitars, big drums, guitar solo, but it's still like to kind of come out that like that. But like I said, that's what I said. I think it changed the paradigm, and it probably after that, bands realized, oh, you could do both. You could be super heavy and then have radio songs. So anyway, it was it's something we're still in. And keep in mind, like I said, with Bad Wolves, I'm a contributing member, but I'm not the guy. I'm part of this machine.
You're a voice.
And so I contribute, but I'm not. So at no point with the band, I've always been able to kind of distinguish myself from the success because I feel like I'm literally just a part of it. I'm a piece of it. I'm a role player. I'm a, supporting actor. I'm not driving the ship. So everything that happens feels like it's happening beyond my control. So I'm just like, I'm part of it. But if I wasn't here, it's not like it wouldn't happen.
Right. It's interesting though that's why I'm so curious to hear your new stuff, because you've had all those experiences. Now you're at home. You don't have to tour. Now you can think about it.
Yeah. Well, keep in mind, the album that we have is an amalgamation of like an album we were putting together with Tommy, and then an album we refabricated without him, and then we wrote a bunch of stuff after. Right. So it's, in a way, it's got one foot in one door and another foot in another. So we really won't know till like a new album what that really looks like when we can kind of start with a really clean slate. So we'll see, but anyway, wow, I didn't think we talked this much about my end of things, but
this is, I'm wrapped up in this world, so I'm just curious.
Yeah, listen,
these are debates we have all the time with the artists that we manage here and I manage, and your experience was so extreme that I was just curious how.
Well, Bad Wolves is just a unique case study. I don't think you can replicate it. And even I saw to get a band to this level, you need 15 things to go right? And out of those 15 things, 10 of them are out of your control, right? It's like having the right manager, having the right label, having the right song, having it come out at the right time, having the band have the right look and kind of whatever functions in a given time period. It's just, I feel like I know more about how this thing works? Yes. But in some ways, it's almost like it's difficult not to be a little more cynical when you kind of see how the sausage is made to some degree. It's fascinating. Like I said, we're still in it, and it's like the story isn't done. And I don't know. I've always been. I think sometimes when you're in a band that kind of has, in hindsight, God forbid, success and what it was still underground in the grand scheme. But we sold records, we did a lot of big tours. And a part of me is always going to have this very kind of maverick, left of center thing. But my favorite bands are Metallica, Guns N' Roses. It's not
me too. That's what I grew up.
So on. I've always had the ambition to do what my heroes did. I've never been what struck me guys like Phil Anselmo. When they got to the top, they're talking about Black Flag and Coroner and Crowbar, and it's almost like his success made him want to go.
He rebelled against himself.
And go to the underground. But I've just never been it's my favorite shit is still that stuff. And by the way, but it's also Meshuggah and At the Gates. Yeah. And Hatebreed and stuff like that. But it's also Michael Jackson and Bruno Mars. You know what I'm saying? I've never looked at things one way. So it's maybe for some people thinking that it's left field, or that it's no, I want to play with the big boys. It's we only got to the level we got to because that's where we got to. It wasn't because we weren't trying to be at the top.
Yeah. I have the same point of view. I mean, that's what all the stuff I grew up on was obviously Judas Priest and Iron Maiden and Van Halen and all the stuff you'd see in the 80s on TV and in Rip Magazine or Circus Magazine. But all of them had, the same thing. They wrote these songs, and, it was all song-based.
They weren't trying to be underground.
No, they were trying to write hits.
Yeah.
And, you know, and then, you know, you fast forward to the 90s, you know, maybe, you know, metal bands sounded cool, but a lot of them didn't write hits. So that's why when I said before, like, it's the hardest thing to do as a band, how to figure out how to take a rad, you know, hard as nails sound and make it big like that. It's fucking hard.
Yeah,
you know?
listen, I think, we're in such the area we're in now, which is a bit more like, I call it like music industry by algorithm.
Yeah.
Where you can essentially get a team of smart people together and they can figure out like we call it formulaic, but I mean a literal formula of like, okay, if your song has these markers in it, we know algorithmically that we will get rewarded.
It's so depressing to me. Like,
So, and producers are doing this and songwriters are understanding, hey, if I, you know, and it becomes a kind of cyclical thing where then that feeds the algorithm more to want the thing that you asked for. So it's a little scary. But for me, I've always been attached to bands that had the hits, massive songs, but always had an edge, always had something made them unique, always something to make it a little weird, a little jagged, a little...
Well, you have to stand out, and that's one. I mean, one thing at least I see is just people. I don't know. Just my own perspective is that, especially new bands, they're not a lot. Everyone's afraid to stand out or do something totally weird. You know, that's jumping on the treadmill who want to play like a big festival.
Well, I think there's a fear, especially if you're talking with like grown-ups, and if you get a group of musicians over 30. The fear is, if it's too weird, then we can't. It's like, I'll tell you, it's one thing I've learned even looking into the, you know, with the Bad Wolves thing and touring with bands like 3 Days Grace and Shinedown, and you see when you go into that world, there's just so many more people that listen to that music that you can be the biggest death metal band in the world, but there's a cap, kind of on how wide it can spread, and you can see that when you look at monthly listeners on Spotify, right? I mean, some bands that are massive bands. A band like Gojira, right, who just had like sold the most records in a week, right, of a band, and they'll like, you know, pick any random like band that's on the radio. So take From Ashes to New, probably has twice as many monthly listeners as Gojira, and they're like, they do well, but they're not at the top. They're not with the Godsmacks and the Avenged Sevenfolds. They're kind of in a tier kind of with us and maybe a little bit below. And they'll have more people listening to them than probably the biggest metal band right now. That's, you know, newer, you know, kind of who's kind of achieved that like, headliner status. So and when people start thinking about that, it's just, so hey, do I want to be playing, you know, the CBGBs of the world? And like I said, and listen, I think those things are being breached constantly, right? With, you know, what you guys work with, Behemoth and Amon Amarth, probably the biggest extreme bands ever. Yeah. If you look at record sales, ticket sales, merch sales, you know, and before that, it was who? It was Cannibal, Dimmu, Cradle of Filth, and now we're seeing that stuff get pushed.
It's so wild, man. I mean, further. You've hit, like, you just described where kind of my career has lain, you know, especially with Behemoth and Amon Amarth, and, you know, my whole MO with those bands. First of all, I'm a fan, like fan of those bands before I got involved with them, but I knew where that algorithm sort of ends, and like my whole goal is, like, I know these bands are commercial, they have melody, they have power, they don't have radio. But the whole game is to see how far we could push it above that line by any means necessary. And to me, that is like, that's the greatest challenge. And, you know, you could have you had that in the 80s, like Iron Maiden. They didn't have radio hits, but they had that thing. They were cool. They looked cool. They had big shows. They had melody and the power. And they did by any means necessary to get massive. And that's kind of what we're doing. Do I want these bands to write hits? Of course. But you don't want to mess that up, though.
But what is a hit, though? The only thing a hit is something that just sticks with you.
Amon Amarth, Pursuit Vikings.
Yeah, but that's what I'm saying. But there are metal hits, right? Yeah. Like there are songs that aren't on the radio in mass scale, but they're still hits. You know, Laid to Rest by Lamb of God is still a hit.
That's a hit. Yeah.
In Waves by
That's a
Trivium
hit,
is a hit in the metal sense. When they play that song live, and there are 10,000 people there, 10,000 people are going to sing along with that song.
That is a hit.
Yeah.
Hindsight 2020, we made a mistake on that record because I remember having this debate where, what's the single? Well, some of us wanted In Waves as a single, but it's kind of heavy. Radio's not going to play it. And there was another song on the radio that sounded quote unquote radio.
Yeah.
So let's go with that one. And, in hindsight, we should have went with the heavy song and maybe had it played on 4 stations versus the one that wasn't as distinct. And,
Yeah.
hindsight is always 2020.
Yeah.
But the problem was
But ultimately, it probably didn't matter.
it didn't matter. But the point was that song was not written with any expectation to be a hit or radio. It was just cool.
But here's the thing. I think it's actually maybe the most poppy song the band has ever done. You know why? That song doesn't even have a verse.
Yeah.
Every part is a chorus.
Yeah.
I'm like, and even though, and by the way, and just because it's screamed doesn't mean but what does it scream? It's 2 words.
Yeah.
But I'm saying, if Lil Jon was screaming,
I think the riff is 2 notes.
That's what I'm saying. But if Lil Jon was screaming those same 2 words, they wouldn't say it wasn't a hit because he's screaming on it. So, like I said, I think we've kind of breached into a new territory now. Like, so when I put on the hard rock playlist on Apple Music, they're playing Architects and they're playing Motionless in White. It's not just Aerosmith. Like, it's what hard rock is now, or you listen to Octane, it's completely changed. And it's and like I call it I coined the term, but the Overton window is usually described for politics, but not for the extremity of music. But the youth culture is ingrained in hearing certain things. I was saying this I was on a Metallica podcast yesterday. I was saying, what Metallica is for me, Slipknot is for the generation under me. And so they're used to hearing certain things that people my age aren't used to hearing.
Right.
So it's just going to keep going that way, I presume.
I don't know. It's a good question. It's hard, It's really hard for me to predict because, I don't know. I mean, you go listen to Octane all day and you go turn on your radio, wherever the local active rock station is. It's for me, most of it's non-inspiring, but
yeah, listen, a lot of it's not my go-to either. A lot of the time, but somehow I kind of ended up in that scene, But so I kind of want to pivot a little bit, because I want to talk a little bit about your background. So you're an artist manager now, but when you got started in this industry, you were a lawyer. Were you?
Yes.
I mean, I imagine you're still a lawyer. Like it goes away.
I still have my license, yes.
So you were an entertainment lawyer?
I was, I was a music lawyer. So I started my career, I went to college. I went to University of Notre Dame, and I didn't know what I wanted to do. I loved 2 things at that point in my life: ice hockey, which I grew up playing and played in college.
You definitely look like a hockey player more than anything.
I take that as a compliment. And music and metal. Like I watched hockey, and I consumed records and media and MTV and anything I could get my hands on. And I grew up on mainstream metal. So I had this fantasy of working in music, but I was from Buffalo, New York. I went to college in the Midwest. It felt like an impossibility. I had no idea how to accomplish that. Like, how do you work for a record label? Nobody tells you. Like, I had no idea. So in my own mind, I thought that if you went to law school, that would help open up doors to go work at a label or a management. Again, nobody told me this. I just had this idea. I think I might have read something somewhere. So I went to law school. And while I was in law school, I remember this specifically. I was walking to law school one day, and I had no money. And I used to stop at a newsstand, and there was a Billboard magazine that was on the rack and I used to just read it every day, standing at the newsstand. And I came across an article Buffalo, New York's maverick folk punk artist starts a big label. It was Ani DeFranco, and I'm like, holy shit, there's this girl who's wildly successful from where I'm from. This is interesting. And I didn't know her music. I didn't know shit. But, I kept that in my mind and finished law school, and then figured out a way how to get in touch with her and her manager. I I think I just called them a couple times. Nobody was answering. I sent them a resume. Nobody was taking my calls, right? So I had this is a funny story. I had a summer internship my last year of law school for a concert promoter in upstate New York. It was called iConcerts. And they had this crazy festival they did up in Toronto where it was like a Woodstock. It was a 3-day festival, rock festival. And, it's probably 96, and a huge festival. They had the band Live was one of the headliners, Bush, Porno for Pyros, Goo Goo Dolls, all this shit. And my job, I worked for a promoter, so my job was to like go pick up these bands in a van from the Toronto airport, drive them to the festival. It was I thought it was the coolest fucking thing in the world. Halfway through the festival, the promoter runs out of money, right? Literally runs out of money. So after the second night of this festival, the promoter and everyone that was, in like the executive promoter office, they left. And they left all the employees there. So we woke up on the third day of the festival. Promoter's gone, money's gone, everything is like, they literally left. And so I'm standing around with a couple of the other people, and the tour managers are starting to come in, like the real managers they're figuring out what's happening. So they figured out, they just pulled the festival. The 30, 40,000 people in the audience are probably going to get pretty pissed and break things or riot. So everyone agreed to play the festival. And one of the artists that was playing that third day was Ani DeFranco. But nobody got paid that day. Like all the artists just played just because they were there, do the right thing. So what I did was I called her manager, and this was probably after 10 times of him not answering my calls. I said, this is, Justin Archangel from iConcerts about Eden Music Festival. Probably calling about their money. So pick the phone up right away. And then I was like, listen, I'm sorry. I work for this festival. I had nothing to do with that. I'm a law student. I know you went to law school. Can I come work for you? And at first he was like, oh my God, are you kidding me? How could you ever work for them? They ripped off the artist. I was like, listen, man, I'm in law school. I wanted experience. So I basically talked my way into an internship at Righteous Babe Records for Ani DeFranco in the 90s. So I switched law schools from Chicago to University of Buffalo and worked for her. And at the time, I don't know if you remember her, but in like the 90s.
Yeah, it was huge, like indie,
She had her own company. She was her own record company, merch company, publishing company. There was like 20 employees, like cover of Spin magazine, doing duets with Prince. It was like unbelievable. And I made up a job. I was just like, I don't know. I was like lawyer assistant. They had a lawyer in New York, and I was just like watching and just filing papers and just being handy wherever I could. Loved it. Loved every second of it. So I ended up graduating from law school, and then they hired me like a full-time job coming out of law school. So, I had this, music job from day one coming out of law school, which is not typical, but I hustled my way into it. And then I worked there for a few years, and I figured I needed a bigger step to learn, So what I did was I got hired by a music law firm in New York City. It was called Leibowitz, Roberts, and Ritholtz, and they were a music boutique firm, maybe 15 to 20 people firm, Madison Avenue. Clients were like NSYNC, Backstreet Boys.
What? How they
Twisted Sister?
How are they boutique then?
Yeah, right. My first clients that they, put me on was wild. It was Twisted Sister. So I got to work with JJ French, the manager, Cara DiGuardi, big songwriter who was just started. She was unknown at the time, so I was helping out like with whatever songwriter agreements. They had the Rifkin brothers who were Loud Records. We did some of that, so I got involved with like the Loud Records publishing company. So I was technically Exhibit's publisher for a couple of years, doing all his like registrations, like collecting mechanical. I did everything. Like it was like being in the trenches, doing every kind of record, like any type of music deal.
So you're really in the thick of basically all the nuts and bolts of
everything.
The actual how artists make money, how all that stuff behind the scenes. By the way, probably my biggest blind spot is like publishing and stuff.
Sure.
It's like for some reason it's
hard.
My brain doesn't want to understand it.
But it was like my job, and I didn't know most of this stuff like when I started there, but you have to learn quickly. So I would read every deal in the office. I would take home like deals from the office that were done and just like kind of read them and just kind of, publishing deals, co-publishing deals, admin deals, record deals, production deals, producer deals, mix everything. And then it was like getting a PhD in law, and then I worked there from like 2000 to 2005. But at the same time I was doing all this, it was an exciting time to be in New York. It was like tons of music every night. Like you had all the stuff happening in Brooklyn, like all the indie cool, yeahs and all Liars. Then you had all the new wave of, American heavy metal that was starting to come in at the same time. So I remember going to shows at Lemoore and seeing like Lamb of God and Atreyu, and all this stuff was just bubbling up, and I was starting to get in the mix a little bit. I started meeting a few managers. I met the Rev at that time. I met, I can't remember who else was around at that. Corey Brennan, Paul Conroy. And I was just starting to make friends and just being social and going out every single night and just meeting people. And then, once people found out I was a lawyer and worked at this place, people would ask me for help. Here's a little deal here. Here's a deal here. And how it flipped into management was that I had met Dale Restaghini, video director extraordinaire. Everybody knows
X-Men,
Dale.
Alumni.
X-Men alumni, and I'm thankful for him. I can't remember how we met, but then he was at the New England Hardcore Metal Festival, maybe 2003, and he picked up a Trivium demo or something, and they had contacted him to make a video for like Light to the Flies. They were indie at the time. They were on maybe Life Force Records or something, and they were going to make a low-budget video with Dale, and they needed some help, and Dale recommended them to me. So they came up to visit me. I don't remember, maybe it was like end of 2003 or something, and I took them on as a client, helped them with a few things. One of the first things I helped them with was to get out of a record deal with Life Force Records to enter into a record deal with Roadrunner Records, because Monty Connor was signing them at the time. So they got a deal with Monty and Roadrunner, which for me, I'd never had a band as a lawyer, my own thing, get a record deal. For me, it was like, it was the most exciting thing in my life. It was unbelievable. It was like, from a kid from Buffalo, New York, who couldn't get in the record business, to having this happen was unreal. So we couldn't find the manager then. The dad, Brian Heafy at the time, was managing them, but he was kind of wanted to step out and hand it to someone who knew what they were doing. And I shopped the band. I shopped the band at the time to any manager I had met. Paul Conroy, Corey Brennan. I even sent it to Tim Smith, who was managing Atreyu, Larry Mazer. Nobody wanted. They were all like, maybe, maybe not. And then, by that time I had, gained the trust of the band and Brian, and they were just like, well, why don't you help us be a manager? And I was like, okay, I don't know what a manager does. I sort of know, but I don't really know how to do anything. Like, I knew how to do contracts, but I didn't know how to order a t-shirt. I didn't know how to like do visas. I didn't know how to like do a show. Like, I didn't know, but I jumped in, and then, all of a sudden we made a record with Jason Sukoff. It was Ascendancy. And then, I was still a lawyer, and I was kind of doing this little side hustle. I didn't really tell anyone at the firm I was doing the managing stuff. It was just, on my own time. And then the record comes out, right? And then it explodes. I don't know if you remember like that time when Ascendancy came out.
Of course I remember.
You were on the tour, yeah.
Well, no, okay. So, I've had Paulo on the show, and I've talked a little bit about Trivium and the relationship we had. So we knew the Trivium guy stuff before Ascendancy, because
did a tour with you in 2004.
Yeah, but even before that.
Yeah.
So basically, because we were buddies with Jason, and we hadn't recorded our record with Jason yet, but we had done demos with Jason, and we had like we'd been friends. So I had like the demos from the previous record, and I was also like me and Corey literally were AIM buddies before he was in Trivium.
How'd that happen?
He was just back then you'd be in like chat rooms and stuff, and people and you'd be in metal chat rooms, and this is before he was even in Trivium. Right. He was just a kid. I knew he was from like Maine or something.
He's from Maine, going to Full Sail University.
So he was a God Forbid fan, and we would just chat about metal, and that's what you do. You just chat with people, and then next thing you know, it's like, hey man, I joined Trivium. I'm like, oh sick. It was before, like I said, they were anything. So I already knew just who they were. I knew what was going on, and we took them on tour. It was just it was a weird thing because it was them, All That Remains, and this band Scars of Tomorrow.
That must have been 2004. That was their first tour.
Spring 2000. I know, that's what I'm saying. So, and it was this weird thing because they were like booked over All That Remains, or they were supposed to flip, and it was like a big deal because All That Remains was more established, and it was. But the thing I always remembered about that was just these kids. They're like 18 years old or something, and they sounded like they'd been on the road for years. You know, like just how tight the band was, how professional they were. It was just, it was really kind of stunning, you know. And for some reason, when you take a band on tour when they're coming up and then they go on to be something really big, like you always feel like invested in their success to some degree because you felt like you helped usher that along, even if it was whatever. They probably could have toured with anyone at that time, but it just, you feel like you get excited, especially when you know the band is good. But same thing with Avenged Sevenfold. We took them on tour a few years before that, and you're rooting for like these artists that you feel like have this great potential, and you feel like you kind of hopefully had some positive hand in helping their career, even though I think people like that, they would have been successful no matter what, but either way you still kind of feel invested in. So I was, and they were, like I said, they were a phenomenon. And I think, but in a way, like Trivium got to take advantage essentially of like that scene that we all built, because we were all steeped in the hardcore scene. And so for bands like us, we could never like shake that off to like cross over into being a metal band. Killswitch never really had to, because they embraced it. Lamb of God got to just be a metal band. But we all kind of came out of that, but in a sense, Trivium got to kind of like sit on top of that, just be a metal band, not be a part of that scene. And they made a classic album, and they had the right package to kind of make, and it was just boom, and it just hit. And like I said, so we went from taking Trivium on tour in 2004, they never toured, to I think it was fall 2005.
Fall 2006. We did a big tour. Yeah.
So within 2 years, we're playing the UK. Every show was sold out before the tour, which to this day I've never done a tour where every show was sold out.
I remember that we started the tour with like 2 sold out shows in Ireland. Like we could have sold out 4. Like crazy.
It was, and to this day I've never, with God Forbid, I never experienced. And for some reason, like it was also God Forbid, we were at the peak of our success and kind of notoriety. We were getting on that album, Constitution Treason, we were getting on magazine covers, and we were, the UK loved. So we were benefiting from it as much, but it went from that to, and you see that kind of up close, and it's something to behold. So to some degree, I mean, you being kind of at the forefront of that, I mean, do you feel like that was it? Because you said you were kind of figuring out as you went. Was it just, were you in a sense almost like me with Zombie, where you just felt like you were a passenger on
That's
something?
maybe why I'm so interested in the Zombie story. But yeah, how it relates to my story is that, here I am, learning to be a lawyer, and I'm hustling on the side, and this thing fucking takes off. And it takes off as fast as any metal band in probably a decade and a half.
I literally, before or since, I'm trying to, because actually, let's say, if you rewind to like the nu metal era, Disturbed, Linkin Park, Slipknot, it was happening. But for like, I don't know, for some reason I perceived Trivium as like, and this is like, might sound douchey, but as a real metal band. Well,
we weren't, those like Disturbed and them were like, FM radio. Like this was not radio. That's was
what I'm saying.
Pure metal
That's
stuff.
what I'm saying. Yeah. I perceived it as like, this is the real quote unquote metal scene. And I don't mean that to be a dick, but it just seemed different, where that didn't happen in this world.
Yeah, it didn't happen. And I was the guy in charge. And it went so, like you said, within a year, we went from nothing to opening for All That Remains to selling out 5,000 tickets in London easy. And all of a sudden we're opening from Metallica, touring all across Europe with Iron Maiden, co-headlining with Slayer in the UK, like crazy shit. So what happened at work was, the demands on my time of that sort of rocket ship was as I'm learning how to do it, it took over my life, like literally 24 hours a day. Like I went from not knowing how to use Excel to like sitting there for a weekend figuring it out so I could make a tour. Everything took me 10 times as long.
You didn't have an assistant?
I didn't have it was just me.
Yeah.
I was the only one. And then so then the lawyers start seeing all this like dark angel management paperwork coming over the fax machine in the law firm. They were like, yo, what's going on here? So I had to tell them what I was doing. And they were happy that something was happening, and they wanted to support me and let me do it. So I had a choice. Like, do I continue with the law stuff? Do I do law stuff and management? Or do I give the manager up? They were fine, but they wanted to make a deal with me to like, own the management company or whatever. And I looked at honestly, at that time in the record industry in 2005, CDs were like not selling as much as they were before.
It was right at the beginning of it starting to. So
I saw that happening. And I saw that how the law firm was having a lot of like institutional clients pull their money out. Like, they used to give the law firm big retainers every month that they started stopping. So I was scared. I was like, oh shit, maybe this lawyer thing is not the right thing to do. And I love the management because I was involved in the music, everything, the music, t-shirt, art. And I loved it. So I was like, fuck it, I'm going in. And I left the law firm, started my own company, and went and worked out of my apartment in Brooklyn. It was me and my girlfriend were the only employees of Dark Angel Management, and we just dove in. And then, I ran that for a few years, and then one of our clients, I should say this, I wasn't totally by myself because one of our big clients for the law firm was Sanctuary Music Group, which is the Iron Maiden company, Rod Smallwood, Andy Taylor, and they knew like I was sort of like part of their family because I was a young lawyer that worked on their stuff. So they kind of like, Rod Smallwood sort of like was a little bit of a mentor for me at the time when I had questions or I ran into a tough, I can call him. So I could call Iron Maiden's manager and he would give me advice. Fucking unreal, right?
Yeah, that's amazing.
And so I sort of like, I think that helped the situation so no big manager would come in and like poach it.
Let me ask you this. Did you ever have situations, would you kind of divulge that to the band? Like if you did feel like you were out of your depth or over your head, would you kind of keep a veneer of like, I've got it all?
Hell yeah, of course.
Okay, okay. Actually, I'm just wondering. I'm like, I was like, were they like cool?
But honestly, like the great thing about Trivium is that they're I guess I'm their uncle, kind of like big brother, uncle. We're open with all that stuff, and we talk about all the mistakes we made back in the day. Like we made mistakes. We made not choosing the right single, making a bad record or two, and why do we make the bad record? Because we said yes to every opportunity.
Listen, I ride or die for the Crusade. I don't give a fuck. I've argued with the band themselves who were like hating on that record. I'm like, yo, I love the Crusade.
I mean, that was why. I mean, like that. I mean, in hindsight, I do like the record. We said yes to like
people don't know this. I modeled for the album cover, so that was me at my peak, my physical form.
We just, in hindsight, the band, we said yes to every opportunity, and we just did not give enough time for the record to write.
Yeah, and listen, and ultimately the artist has to be happy with it. Can I want to speak to, I think, their unique temperament, work ethic, discipline, and listen, I'm sure a lot of that funnels out of Matt as being kind of the culture setter to some degree, and also I think it holds sway with the idea that they were also had this stuff in mind so young that it was maybe, and I think you can speak to this about their kind of being mature well beyond their years, allowing them the ability to kind of understand kind of and and keep everything in order. I don't know if that, I mean, maybe you can kind of speak to that a little bit.
Honestly, yeah, no, I know what you're saying. They are, listen, we work and live in heavy metal and rock. People who choose to be heavy metal musicians sometimes aren't the most well-adjusted people, and those who help manage them, and so, but it creates, a lot of bands, just the pressure, like bands fall apart, whatever. They're incredibly grounded people. They have nice families, stable families who supported what they did. So they always had like a stable existence. And the biggest thing with Trivium is that, like when they started, Ascendancy was written with youthful exuberance. It was like a happy mistake, right? They were so young, 18, 17 years old. They didn't have the wealth of knowledge even about music or metal that they have now. It just came out, right? But all the growing, they grew up in public. So every record was sort of like a next step in their development. But as every year has gone on, they've just consumed like music and knowledge and writing, and they're open with their mistakes. So if they write a bad record, or they're self-reflexive, so they could look at themselves in like a third-party way and say, we didn't do that right, this wasn't right, we could do this better. And I don't have that. I've never seen that with any other artist, where if something goes wrong, a lot of artists are like, fuck it, fire the manager, fire the agent, label sucks. No, they always look internally first. And how that's manifested themselves is they work really hard at songwriting. Like they don't, when they make a record, they grind on their own songs. They play as a band.
But I guess the point I was making was, to some degree, bands have to have some ability to self-manage. Yeah. Right? So that gives you an advantage, as opposed to where you can actually be a manager and not be a babysitter.
Yeah, I don't have to do that.
That's what I'm saying. Where I can speak just to my own band scenarios, where I looked at individual dysfunction, collective dysfunction, and even
so energy draining.
Well, no, but it is what it is. Mm-hmm. That's why, I wrote this article when Chimera, it was after God Forbid had broken up, but it was like when Chimera and Shadows Fall broke up and Bleeding Through. And I wrote this article basically about just keeping it real with like why this group of bands is breaking up and why God Forbid broke up, and that it's mostly our fault, and people connected to that because people want to think that, well, to get big, you just gotta make good music. And it's like, no, well, the music helps. And usually the best bands, I think, do persevere, but it's all the behind the scenes stuff and being well adjusted. And like, something I've found is so many of the bands that have been successful are like Iron Maiden, where they have one manager. Yeah. For 30, 40 years, or they have one booking agent or one label.
Trivium have had one label, one manager, the same booking agents from the start.
That's what I'm saying. Like,
I know that's not typical. But
it's not typical, but it's not atypical in the artists many of the biggest artists. Metallica's had the same manager for how long?
John Jackson since like 1981.
Right. Slayer has had the same manager for however long.
Late 80s.
Machine Head, even though they had one break, but they got back.
Joseph Houston.
Exactly. So or Kill Switch, Kenny and Vaughn.
Support for this podcast comes from Invent Together. According to studies, less than 13% of all inventors who hold a U.S. patent are women. Black and Hispanic college graduates patent at half the rate of their white counterparts. But we can fix that by increasing participation in innovation and patenting by underrepresented groups. It would quadruple the number of American inventors and increase annual GDP by almost $1 trillion. Invent Together is a coalition of organizations, companies, universities, and concerned citizens committed to ensuring that everyone has the opportunity to invent and patent. Because the more diverse the American patent system gets, the stronger and more successful our nation will become. What can you do to help diverse inventors patent and unleash economic opportunity? Find out at inventtogether.org. Learn more and take action today.
This episode of the X-Man podcast is brought to you by BetterHelp. I know all the listeners of this show understand that my philosophy in life is to deal with your issues before they deal with you. And I've always been a big proponent of therapy and counseling and things like that to just get ahead of yourself, because I think so many people, they go to the gym and work out, or they do these things to deal with their physical body, but it's always important to deal with our mental and emotional health. And what BetterHelp does, remember that's H-E-L-P, is they provide online counseling and therapy. What makes this service great is you go on their website and you fill out their questionnaire and actually detail whatever types of issues you're dealing with, and they'll set you up exactly with the type of counselor or therapist you need for your specific needs. And it's much more affordable than traditional offline counseling, and financial aid is available. Remember, this service is available worldwide, and everything you share is confidential. I'm going to go check out BetterHelp because I'm going through a rough time myself, and I think that's the responsible and smart thing to do for my personal health. I want you to start living a happier life today. As a listener, you'll get 10% off your first month by visiting our sponsor at betterhelp.com/xman. Join over 1 million people who have taken charge of their mental health. Again, that's BetterHelp, HELP.com/xman.
This episode is brought to you by HP Instant Ink. No one is reading your mind, but HP Instant Ink knows when your printer is running low and sends you new cartridges, so you never have to think about ink. Save up to 50%. You'll pay less than $5 a month for ink and never run out again. Find out if your printer is eligible and enroll today at hpinstantink.com. Conditions apply. For details, visit hp.com/instantink Spotify.
So what I've seen is stability is the most is a factor that matters, and mistakes I made that I think, God forbid, made with certain individuals. I would tell them right now, like, hey, I think
Your band had some strong personalities.
Exactly, and that didn't necessarily jibe with consistency.
Mm-hmm.
And when we had those years where it was like, hey, we had this manager and this manager, that's a reflection of the dysfunction of the band's inability to manage itself.
Yeah.
So you need to do that. The manager can't be like the emergency surgeon who has to come in and fucking do like CPR and put the heart back together. Like it has to be a general maintenance, right? You come in for a checkup. How you doing? I'm doing this. Maybe you should eat a little less fast food, smoke a little, whatever. Like that's what the manager should be. It shouldn't be this like hyper invasive thing.
No, I agree. And sometimes, obviously some of the greatest artists were people who were fucking crazy. But that's a different era. Like I think if you're some rapper who makes, $300,000 every time you leave your house to play a show, or gets $100,000 a feature or something, you can kind of afford to be a screw up. But I'm sorry, if you're a metal musician, very few people are big enough to be fuck ups. I mean, look at how many of those young rappers died within like a 6-month period because they're out there. Well, even in metal, look at the acts that are still doing well, and look at the artists from those acts who've been removed from the equation, so the act can continue on. Slipknot or whoever. Trivium got rid of a drummer, or a couple of drummers. It's crazy doesn't work well in our business because it's too hard.
Well, that's what's funny about these big arena tours we do. Well, no, it's like people think it's like some big party, and it's like, no, it's a bunch of like really healthy 45-year-old dudes working out,
lots of
and
yoga,
drinking juices and not drinking after the show. And me, I'm the fucking degenerate looking around for something to party with. I'm like, Jesus, I'm the last one to stay.
Oh, come on. You guys had to party a little bit.
No, we had our times. Listen, thank God for the 3 days grace, guys.
You're done at 7:30, got all night,
Hey, some of those, dude, we were doing that. It was Five Finger, Breaking Benjamin, Nothing More. We'd play at 5. So you'd have a long time. The worst is when you have too many guests because
Yeah.
you have to entertain people for like 5-7 hours because it's a long ass show.
It is shocking though when people who don't know either come with me to a show or something early and they see what it's like. It is literally like old men doing yoga, like protein shakes and naps and all this. It's not what the perception is. But
you have to.
If you tour hard, touring is hard. You know, I give respect to artists who do it. It's, you know, I've gone out on the road and, you know, but I'm not the artist. I'm not out there for months at a time, and it's respect. It's hard, you know? Yeah,
it's not, I don't think touring is ideal. It's not an ideal lifestyle for almost anyone. I don't think, especially. It's
not the real world. Like it's every night is a party that is your party, and it's got to play on you mentally, right? Like you have that endorphin rush for a show, and then what? You're supposed to turn it off and go to bed? Like,
well, you have to make that choice. Because I think part of being healthy on tour is kind of being boring. Yeah. You know, I've never been great at it.
Do you are you one of these guys who sits in the venue all day, or do you get out and explore?
I do as much as I can. I mean, that's kind of the beauty of, in a sense, it's like getting this second life as an artist and being able to like have, you know, when you do these bigger tours, you have days off in Europe, and you have, hey, I have money now, so I can actually go out and go to restaurants and go to museums, you know. So it's like the last tour we did was Bad Wolves, Megadeth, Five Finger Death Punch, and we played Milan, and I got to just walk around Milan all day.
That was a good tour. That was a big tour.
And it was, dude, I mean, average attendance on the tour was like 10,000 people. It was nuts. But I'm saying, but just actually being in a position to actually, like, when you have a road crew, you can leave the venue and go do things. But when, you know, God forbid, it's like you do everything. I'm handling the merch and I'm setting up my gear, and you're driving the van, and you don't really get to experience kind of just the world. A lot of times you'd be all over the world, but you don't really get to experience it because you're working, you know? And that's, you know, every step I have to say with Bad Wolves getting to do these certain things, I never hesitated to smell the roses because of my previous experience, I always expect it to end. My experience was I did a thing and we struggled to keep it going until it couldn't go, and then I was like back in the real world trying to figure things out. And I think I've always thought of like, you have to do other things outside of music, because if you just dependent on that,
content creator now too.
I mean, well, honestly, the best thing about that was discovering that I'm good at other things. Because I think, you know, like all I did was play music and only care about that for 10, 15 years. And then you start to think, oh, I can only do this. And it's not true. You actually, when you're doing a band and you're basically learning logistics, you're learning how to deal with employees, you're learning how to do all these different skills. As long as you just realize that and think, and kind of just skew it positively, like, oh, I can apply this to other things. Yeah. And or even just like dealing with fans, right? You're kind of like the guy who owns the bar who has to like greet people. You learn people skills. No, it's true. Like you learn how to kind of be endearing to people and listen and but that's just people skills. So when I started bartending, and you have certain people skills, and you know how to kind of turn on the charm or be whatever. Like that's all stuff that you don't really think about. Yeah. And it's just important. And now things are evolving where it's how connective you have to be with social media or streaming and all these different things. You know, we all have to be good on camera, and we all know how to kind of I mean, if you're an artist that literally just plays music and tours, like you're pretty lucky person. like
Def Leppard or something.
Yeah, I mean, or just listen, there's plenty of people. I mean, I think Howard Jones, like he's not on social media. I think
ZZ Top, they just put out a tour today. It's like 3 months long. Like it's amazing. Yeah, they just go play.
So I want to talk about some of the. So you started actually managing a couple other bands around that time. Mm-hmm. Once Trivium had some success, you started managing a band called Sanctity. Yep. And Jesse Leach's band post Killswitch called Seamless. And both really good bands, but both bands that didn't really seem to get past a certain point. What was your experience trying to basically start from scratch? Because it wasn't like you went and managed Trivium and got, okay, I'm going to get Unearth, right? Or I'm going to get Testament, some established band. You tried to build two new baby bands. And what did you learn in that experience?
First one was, I don't remember the timeline, but Sanctity. I found those guys through Jason Sukoff, who they were recording with him, and loved what they were doing. The demos, went and met the band in North Carolina, I think it was. I was just transfixed by Jared, the singer, who I just thought was a star.
Who's currently in Machine Head.
Machine Head, yeah. So I thought like this guy has something. So played the demos for Monty Connor. He signed the band. So it was, again, another like quick boom, boom, boom scenario where I had another band sign to Roadrunner, right? A band that had no fan base, nothing, none. So we made a record with Jason Sukoff and, put them out on tour. They did a bunch of tours where they did one with Megadeth. They got one of those Gigantors.
I saw them with Symphony X.
Yeah, Symphony X. Went out with Trivium in Europe. That was a bill. It was Trivium, Annihilator, Gojira, Sanctity.
Jesus.
Yeah. Anyway, and it just, the problem was the band wasn't ready.
Yeah.
We pushed them really fast. They weren't great live. A couple band members were not very good. And it just wasn't ready. Finished that whole cycle, got a couple new band members in that were really good, and we were just about to go make the second record. And I remember I got a call from Jonas, who was the head of Roadrunner at the time, who had just went to see the band open for Children of Bodom at like the Lecture Factory. He didn't tell me. He wanted to go see if the band was ready for the next record, and he didn't think so. He was like, we're dropping the band. And at that point, like, we had negative money, like nothing, and these guys have nothing. So they went back, and that was it. Like, we couldn't like continue. They went back and had to get real lives. Jared had a kid, and it was like splintered. So it was really, for me, it was depressing because I thought they were fantastic, and I really thought, I believe in Jared.
Yeah, I think the thing too, listening to the record, because I still listen to the record,
it's good,
is that it was probably a little too close to Trivium. Where I think
possibly,
maybe if they got to that next record, they could have, like, actually a lot of it sounds like low era, like Testament to me.
A little bit, yeah.
His voice especially.
They should have gotten a second record, and I was so mad at that time because there were very few artists at Roadrunner who didn't get the chance for the second, and I was just ashamed that it was on my watch, and I was like, fuck this. Like,
also, a weird time in the scene, right? It was just like
CDs stopped selling.
Well,
too.
CDs stopped selling, but also the genre was hitting. Like, that's around the kind of time. Yeah. God forbid, kind of started to fall off. Shadows Fall started to fall off.
2006, 2007.
Yeah. That era was like this, right in that bridge between like deathcore becoming the cool thing.
And at the time, Roadrunner was signing legacy acts to fill up their roster.
Yeah, like Hatebreed and
but even like they
Megadeth,
I think
Dream Theater,
but classic rock stuff. They were like signing Leonard Skinner. So like all the money, Rat. Like, so it was like definitely a sea change, and I got caught up in that. But love Jared. He's a Machine Head. He's still kicking ass,
dude. You know what's funny is I asked him. He was the first guy I thought of when Dallas was out of. God forbid, because of the vocals.
Yeah,
because like
that's why he got Machine Head, because he did Deuce's backup vocals.
Yeah, and I knew he could play his stuff, but it was the same. He's like, dude, I have a kid. He thought about it, but he's like, but God forbid we could pay you, but it wasn't like it wasn't anything to write home about. But so what about
and then Seamless? Yeah, I picked up Seamless, total random. I saw him like a blurb about maybe them on the PRP, and I can't remember how, but Derek Kurzweil got in contact with me, or I got in contact with him. I don't remember, but got my hands on that first music they made with what was the song? Lay My Burden Down on it.
I was just listening to it,
and I just